Thank you for tuning in to the best parenting show on the internet, Post Daily Dose.
It's the Post. It's the Post. It's the Post. The Post Daily Dose. It's the Post. It's the Post. It's the Post. The Post Daily Dose. It's the Post. It's the Post.
Hello, beautiful people. How's my Facebook family? How my posties doing on this fantastic, freaking fantastic Friday, baby? Freaking fantastic Friday. Freaking fantastic Friday. TGIF, everyone. Hope you have had a fantastic Friday. Hello there, Mimi. And thanks for joining me this evening. Hope you're looking forward to your evening, your weekend, and just you got plans for relaxation and enjoyment and rest and restoration. That is my hope for all of you. So this evening we're going to talk a little bit about oxytocin. Everyone's been talking lately about all these different drug companies, and in fact, I just posted something on my personal Facebook page that in 2018, I had one of my readers shared this with me, a link, and I put it on my personal Facebook page. In 2018, the United States spent $486 billion. May have been 480 something odd billion dollars on pharmaceutical medication. Over $480 billion on pharmaceutical medications. To me, that just reeks of our obsession with a quick fix. We're always looking for the quick fix. And the problem, I call it fear-based prescribing. I've actually been, let me pull this up a little closer so you can see my pretty face even better. You get to close up a Big Papa today. Oh my goodness, I didn't say, hey, welcome to another episode of Post Daily Dose with your trusted parenting advisor and faithful guide and servant on the healing journey. What's my name? Big Papa Brian+Post. I just got all discombobulated because I'm out here in LA, and I guess the sun may have been beating on my head today. My brain might have been a little bit scrambled, and it's Friday, and I'm probably still a little bit jet lagged, but 480 something billion dollars. And the point I made in the Facebook post is that I call that fear-based prescribing, especially when it comes to children, and especially psychiatric medication. And we don't realize that a lot of times as a parent, you'll take your child to the psychiatrist for some behavior problems. Psychiatrists pretty much only prescribe, and they'll give your child medication for a series of behavior symptoms. Well, then you come back, in 90 days, and maybe that behavior's gotten better because that drug is suppressing that behavior, but then another behavior shows up, and so you tell the psychiatrist that, and the psychiatrist says, well, let's add this drug. And so you say, okay, because you trust the psychiatrist. And then you go home and you come back, 90 days later, 6 months later, and you say, well, this has gotten better and this has gotten better, but now this is happening. And the psychiatrist says, you know what? Let's tweak this a little bit, and let's tweak this a little bit, and then let's add this. And so then a year later, after frequent visits, your child is on 5 different medications. Could be 3, could be 5, could be 10. I've worked with 7-year-olds, not 7-year-olds. I've worked with 3-year-olds who were on 7 different psychiatric medications before. 3 years old. 3 years old. Mind you, none of these drugs having been studied on children and the long-term effects on their brain. 3 years old, 7 different psychiatric medications. So I've seen that gamut. But it's not just psychiatric medication, it's all medicine. All pharmaceutical medicine has side effects. And if you are not mindful of the side effects, you may end up going to the doctor and getting treated for something, one condition, and then the medication you're taking causes something else, and then you end up on another medication for that, and before you know it, you are a contributor to that over $480 billion worth of pharmaceutical medication. And the problem with that the problem. And anytime I talk about medication, that's never an invitation for you guys to go get off of drugs or get off your meds or take your kids off of meds. None of that stuff. You're on those meds now. Stay on them until you can get to feeling better so that you can work yourself off of them. So I've worked with kids over the years, countless kids over the years. It's never been an issue for me if the kids are already on meds. Leave them there. There's so many other things that you can do to create regulation in the relationship and the environment before you start jacking with the drugs that it's not even a major factor. But once you start creating regulation in the relationships and the environments and you start seeing the child improve, then that's when you start having a conversation with your physician or your psychiatrist about reducing the medication. So the thing is we're not focused on prevention. Where medication is an intervention, is not a preventative practice. And when we're not focused on prevention, what ends up happening is we end up being victim and held hostage to these drugs, because it's like that's what we become dependent on. And you're dependent on it because you're not getting to the root of the issue. And one of the things that you all know that I focus on a lot is stress. I believe that all behavior arises from a state of stress. I also believe there are only two primary emotions. I know there are only two primary emotions, love and fear. And it's so easy for us to get mired down in the concepts, the framework of being individuals defined by our diseases and disorders. You have to understand that there's medical research that says 98% of disease and disorders related to stress in the autonomic nervous system. I truly do believe that stress is the fundamental cause of most all the ailments that afflict us, and more than that, the stress at a body level actually converts to the emotion of fear, and it keeps us in a constant state of survival. So it's actually being in a constant state of stress and fear that leads to so many of the conditions that we end up medicating, trying to get better through medication. And unfortunately, the medication isn't doing anything for your amygdala. The medication isn't doing anything for your adrenal glands. In fact, a lot of times it's depleting your adrenal glands. So it's not doing anything to help your primary stress hormones in your brain. Number one, to just dial down. But number two, what's not happening is your anti-stress hormone is not getting addressed. Now, I'm going to share something with you guys that you've probably never heard. And I know this because I actually was a part of formulating a supplement and developed a supplement called Oxytocin Factor about 10 years ago. Well, maybe it wasn't that year. 8, 9, 10 years ago. And oxytocin is your brain's anti-stress hormone. And what you have to know about oxytocin is that it's a learned response. So you don't just you're not automatically born with oxytocin. When the baby is in the mother's womb, the mother's loving attention, her loving energy, the vibration, the vibration of her partner, the music and the good food and the laughter and the happiness and the joy and the excitement about being pregnant, all that goes towards releasing oxytocin. And instead of the opposite, it's kind of contrary to cortisol, because a mother who's really stressed when she's pregnant, actually the cortisol is flushing through the womb. And so it's literally the difference between being nurtured, being developed in a cold bath versus a warm bath. And because oxytocin is warm to the system, it warms the system, and stress and cortisol is cold to the system. That's why when you are stressed, oftentimes your hands and your feet get really cold, because the blood in your body actually runs to your primary organs, your intestines and your heart, in an effort to keep you alive in the midst of stress. It's a survival mechanism. So oxytocin is a learned response in your brain, whereas cortisol in your amygdala is automatic. And there's research that says, and there was for a while, and I don't know, it's a pharmaceutical thing, I'm sure, pharmaceutical company thing. They made oxytocin readily available, and then they kind of took it off the market. And of course it's synthetic, or sometimes it's bioidentical. The ones I did were bioidentical, meaning they were natural, derived from yams, to mimic the same chemistry, biochemistry of a human. That's why potatoes, when they rot, they smell literally like a dead person, because yams have the same genetic, many of the same genetic components that a human has. So that's why they use them a lot in science and in research. Hey, Amber Rose, yes, oxytocin is good. So what happens is there was oxytocin. It was being readily available, and there's this little research finding that with autism, and I think it also spoke to schizophrenia, but it's also autism specifically, said that with autism, oxytocin is the only medication that's ever been proven effective. I'm going to say that again. And I'd have to kind of dig back in my files to find where that quote came from, but it was very clear that with autism, the therapeutic use of oxytocin was the only medication that's ever been proven to be effective. And that's a huge statement. Oxytocin's your brain's anti-stress hormone. And when I developed oxytocin, it was to give people an opportunity. And it feels to the brain and to the body, it feels much like CBD oil does. It's very subtle. It's not something that gets you high. It's not something that zones you out. It's just a very subtle, relaxing feeling. And we create it naturally. But because it's learned, if you didn't get it early in life, then you have a diminished oxytocin response. So when you're experiencing stress, high levels of stress, and this is what's going on for most of your children, is that when they're experiencing high levels of stress, their oxytocin response isn't responding to the outpouring of the cortisol like it should. So the outpouring of the cortisol has actually become stronger over time because of the chronic exposure of stress, and the oxytocin gets diminished because it's connected to the hypothalamus, and that part of the brain starts to shrink when it continues to be overwhelmed by the cortisol. So young children that come from environments of stress and neglect and abuse and trauma, adopted children, foster children, some biological children, they don't have healthy oxytocin responses. And so one of the things that you're doing as a parent when you're loving and nurturing your children through their pain and through their struggle is you're actually teaching their brains oxytocin. You're actually teaching the brain, the hypothalamus, to release oxytocin in the presence of stress. That's why when your children are acting out and you don't become reactive, but you're actually able to be calm and be present, you're actually turning on your child's oxytocin response. That's what helps them start calming down. The tone of voice is fantastic. The fact that you're present is fantastic. The fact that you may go get them something to eat is fantastic. That you may open up some dialogue or communication, all that's amazing. But what's going on underneath the surface is actually you're turning on their oxytocin response. And here's the thing. A part of the healing dynamic of relationship is that relationship gives us an opportunity to trigger oxytocin in the brain of the person that we're connecting with, that we're in relationship with. So when you make eye contact, you're releasing oxytocin. When you smile at your child, you're releasing oxytocin. When you give them a hug, I've talked to you guys about this before, a 20-second hug is the most, research says it's the most effective way to release the highest amount of oxytocin. 20 seconds. When you're holding your child, that's releasing oxytocin. When you're giving your child a bottle, that's releasing oxytocin. When you're tickling and wrestling your child, that's releasing oxytocin. Now you got to be careful with the tickling because sometimes tickling becomes stressful. So you don't want to go overboard, but Play and laughter and joy is releasing oxytocin. Going for walks together, releasing oxytocin. Sitting down at the dinner. I believe that's why this was research from years ago, said that children who come from homes where they practice the family dinner on average have higher intelligence. I believe that's because the family dinner is an opportunity to release oxytocin. So eating good food releases oxytocin. Warm baths, bubble baths, relaxation, music, art. There's so many ways. Breathing. There's so many ways that we can interact and engage with our children that release oxytocin, and it starts to change their brain. So the parents that I've worked with over the years, The parents that have the biggest success and the biggest breakthroughs are the parents who do one really important thing. They start to reduce their reactivity to their child. By reducing the reactivity to their child, they're reducing their likelihood of becoming a threat to their child, which means by reducing their reactivity, reducing their likelihood of becoming a threat to their child, what they're actually doing is they're setting up a dynamic to turn on their child's oxytocin response by no longer becoming a threat. When you stop being a threat to your child, you start being a safety figure. When you become a safety figure, you become capable of turning on your child's oxytocin. You become capable of doing that just through eye contact, through smell, through touch, through sound. I mean, you can just do it automatically. Just your presence alone can turn on your child's oxytocin response when they're in a state of distress. And it requires repetition. So this is not something that just happens overnight. It's something that you are literally training the brain to do. So when you're rubbing your child's back and you're using a form of sensory stimulation that feels good to them. Some children like a back scratch. Some children like their head rubbed. Some children like to be held tight. Some children like to be brushed. They like to have their arms and their backs brushed. You know what your child's experience is. But when you're doing that, what you're actually doing is you're coaching their brain to start turning on oxytocin. In children who come from environments of neglect, that mechanism is oftentimes rusted shut. I mean, it's rusted closed. So what you experience with these children is high levels of anxiety and stress and agitation and very low opportunities to calm themselves. And so when you start doing these things in a repetitive way, it's like spraying WD-40 into their brain, and you're loosening that oxytocin gauge. And as you loosen that oxytocin gauge, you get rid of that creaking and that squeaking. Pretty soon, that child starts releasing oxytocin more readily in the presence of stress. That's what helps them to be successful. So that's why you don't want to create more stress for your children if at all possible. That's why you want to breathe before becoming reactive. And we always have that moment where our brain immediately pumps out that cortisol. We want to catch that moment. We want to breathe. We want to take those 3 to 10 deep breaths like I talk to you about all the time. Choose love. When you're choosing love, you're choosing oxytocin, because oxytocin is your brain's love hormone. Not only is the anti-stress hormone, it's also referred to as the love hormone, referred to as the cuddle chemical. Susan Kachinskas in the book Chemistry of Connection says it is oxytocin that makes love possible. It's so powerful. Susan and I wrote another book together called Oxytocin Parenting. I think it's available as an ebook on Amazon. You can get it. I definitely suggest Chemistry of Connection. And Paul Zak is another. He's probably the world's leading oxytocin researcher. He's at Claremont University out here in California. Another individual, if you want to study a little further and learn more about oxytocin, you should check out some of the work of Dr. Zak. So that's Susan Kachinskas. That's Kuchinskas, Chemistry of Connection and Oxytocin Parenting, co-authored with yours truly. And Paul Zak, Z-A-K. So remember, guys, in any given situation, we can continue to react from our same imprints of stress, fear, and overwhelm, and just let that cortisol rack our brains and continue that same conditioned pattern that's been following year after year after year, that's causing our oxytocin response to get stuck and rusted shut. Or we can stop, we can take 3 to 10 deep breaths, and we can go spray a little WD-40 on that baby. Take those deep breaths, choose love, and release and let the oxytocin flow. I hope you let the oxytocin flow this evening in your life and in your home. And thank you so much, Fifi Cat. Says, I appreciate you so much. Thank you. You're welcome. I hope you let the oxytocin flow in your home and in your life and through the weekend. And I love you guys. If no one's told you that today, I'm telling you, I love you. I honor you. I respect you, I cherish you, I value you. Thank you for showing up here and tuning in. It touches me, and it's also motivating. And we're just going to keep pushing and probably today we're going to break 30,000 followers on our Facebook Post+Institute page, which is super cool. So just want to send you guys mad love. Mad love, mad love, mad love for you. And just like the Mad Hatter. I have to get me a Mad Hatter hat and just be mad with love for you. So God bless you guys. Have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you on Monday.